Welcome back. In this video, we are going to learn about T cell immunity, which is also known as cell-mediated immunity. Now, as opposed to the B cell, when the B cell comes along and it sees the antigen binds to it directly. The antigen binds to it directly, becomes a plasma cell, and then starts kicking out lots of antibodies. In contrast to that, when the T cell comes along, and there's an antigen, it's going, antigen, where? I don't see an antigen. No antigen here, can't do anything. So it needs a little bit of help. And the help it's going to get is going to come from a macrophage. And so the macrophage is going to see the antigen and it'll go, yes, I engulf it. Chops it up into little pieces. And then what it's going to do, it's going to present part of the antigen like on a silver platter. And so when the T cell comes along the next time, it'll say, can you see me now? Can you see me now? It goes, yes, now I can see you, and it'll bind to it and be activated. So what does that look like in drawings? The T cell cannot bind directly to a free-floating antigen. So the antigen has to be engulfed by a macrophage, where the macrophage will do its job and it'll start chopping up the antigen in fragments, and it'll take an antigenic particle and present it in a receptor. And this macrophage, which is presenting the antigen, we have a name for it. We call it an antigen presenting cell. And from now on, I think I abbreviate it in APC, an antigen presenting cell. And now the T cell recognizes the antigen as it's presented by the APC, and the T cell becomes activated. So it requires the two cells to interact with each other for T cell activation. So here is another drawing showing the macrophage engulfing the antigen, chopping it up, taking a little piece and presenting it on a receptor to which the T cell can bind and be activated. Now, B cells can become APCs, but it's a very minor role of B cells. So if you take an immunology class later on, they'll talk about that. But for us, B cells is only antibody mediated immunity. Now, a cell that's related, a cousin to the macrophage, are our dendritic cells, and these have a major role as antigen presenting cell. And in fact, it's usually dendritic cells that become the APCs that activate T cells, because the macrophages are too busy getting rid of the rest of the debris. So when the T cell is activated, there's a whole host of different diverse clones it can become. Starting at the bottom, it can become a helper T cell, often abbreviated with T and H, or a suppressor T cell with an S, a memory T cell with a B, or a cytotoxic T cell. So we're going to go through all these various types of T cells one by one. But let me review this activation of the helper T cell again. Here we have this blue antigen, which is bound to a protein on the antigen presenting cell. This one doesn't look very much like a dendritic cell. It looks more like a macrophage, but pretend it's star-shaped. If I had had a star-shaped starfish, I would have used that instead. All right, so that is the primary binding to the receptor on the T cell to activate the helper T cell. But in addition, there are co-receptors. And co-receptors are just protein things that don't have anything to do with antigens, but is just a second place of contact between the antigen presenting cell and what is going to be the helper T cell. And when that that binding in both sites occurs, then what happens is the antigen presenting cell is going to start releasing cytokines, interleukins, tumor necrosis cells, and basically those give positive feedback to the helper T cell, which just says like, make more, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more, let's attack more. So let me talk about the difference between helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells, because those are the two biggies that are going to give us the cell-mediated reaction. The cytotoxic T cell, which is, you know, the T with a C, often called a CD8 cell, I want you to think of a frontline soldier carrying a bayonet. Can't be an AK-47. It's gotta have that knife blade attached to the front of it. And in contrast to that, the helper T cell, which you would think, oh, maybe it's the person bringing more ammunition for the cytotoxic T cell. No, 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 no. The helper T cell is General Patton. It's the boss. I don't know why it's called the helper T cell, because it's the freaking boss. Okay, and sometimes it's called the CD4 cell. So in other words, the helper T cell is going to tell the cytotoxic T cell what to do. Yeah. So it's going to release cytokines, interleukin 2, which says cytotoxic T cells, time to go to war. So in addition to the interleukins, or the cytokines, which make the cytotoxic T cell go to work, it secretes other cytokines, which have the autocrine effect, making more helper T cells, as well as paracrine effect, which is going to affect other cells. And we'll see some of that shortly. And these other cells will actually go back and may become APCs themselves. And so can you see how this whole thing is self-perpetuating? It's not one little reaction, but the reaction gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Huge explosion. Cytokine storm. Okay, so let's look at that cytotoxic T cell. Calm down and let's just look and see what's happening on the front lines. So when the T cell becomes a cytotoxic T cell, that cytotoxic T cell is the one that's doing the direct attack of either the foreign cell or the cell that's infected by the virus. And so here's how it does it. It binds to it first. There's receptors. It's going to bind to the antigen on the target cell. Then what's going to happen, it's going to have perforins which poke holes into the target cell, and it's going to release enzymes called granzymes into the target cell. And after that, it's gonna back up. Who, me? I don't know what happened to it. It wasn't me. Yeah, it was. Okay. And so what happens to the target cell? It dies. Yeah. Cytotoxic, toxic to the cell. It kills the cell. Okay. Now, the helper T cell can do more than just telling cytotoxic T cells go to war, okay? Yes, we talked already how it binds and gets activated, but when it gets activated, there actually are different types of helper T cells. One type that we talked about are the ones that activate the cytotoxic T cells. They also activate macrophages. Another type can recruit neutrophils and even more activate, so you can get nonspecific immunity becoming robust in the area that specific immunity is occurring. And another type, mind blown, activates B cells. So this is cell-mediated immunity, which is then going to say it's time for some antibody-mediated immunity. How is this going to do it? It's going to release cytokines, which will cause B cell proliferation. We will make B memory cells, but we'll also make plasma cells. You recognize these little plasma cells? And guess what the plasma cells are going to make? Antibodies. Yes. And their antibodies they are making are against the antigen that activated the T cell. So the B cell does not have to find it directly. The T cell says this is the antigen that you are going to be making antibodies against. All right, so now we have all these cytotoxic T cells, we have these B cells against it, and it's like, okay, it's gone. And that's when suppressor T cells come in to being, because they say, stop the reaction. They turn the burners off. Let the stove cool down. The antigen has been conquered. But your body's saying, what do I do about this huge clone of B cells? What do I do about this huge clone of cytotoxic T cells? What do I do about this huge clone of helper T cells? And the body says, well, time for a programmed cell death. Apoptosis is going to occur. This is a normal process. When we don't need it, now we are going to have those cells undergo what we call pre-programmed cell suicide. If this didn't occur, and if all these clones of cells remain behind, you would either end up with autoimmune diseases or leukemias or lymphomas. Not a good thing. But apoptosis happens in your body 24/7 every single day since long before you were born. So going back and looking at this fetus that's, about a month old, do you notice this hand bud with these little fingers, and you see how the fingers are all fused to each other? Are your fingers still fused to each other? Do you have webs that go all the way up to your fingertips? Of course not. What got rid of your webbing? Apoptosis. So yeah, apoptosis is a good thing. So here is a summary slide. I suggest you pause and you look at it, or look at it in your notes, because this has to do with all the different important things that helper T cells can do. And then once you understand that, and you've understood your B cell immunity, now you understand your T cell immunity. Here on the left side in pink, this is your B cell or humoral immunity. And on the right with the blue background, this is your T cell immunity. Talk yourselves through each of these processes. Make sure you say the words. Make sure you understand what's going on. Try to say the words just from the pictures. Yes, there's words there to help you when you get stuck. And then don't forget, you need to cross back over from the T cell world to the B cell world. All right. Once you're done with that, so definitely pause that and do that. Do not go to the next slide until you have walked yourself through this entire process at least once. Then you may continue. I want you to realize that against free-floating bacteria and viruses that are floating around, it is a B cell antibody-mediated immunity that's going to be effectively attacking them. And in contrast to that, cells that are already infected by virus as well as cancer cells, we are talking T cell immunity. So review these two if you need to as well. And if you have, you should be able to answer this question. For a B cell, where is the antigen located that it's going to attack? Because it's a different location than where it is for T cells. If you can't understand this, go back to the previous slides. The answer is there. So the last slide basically is an overview showing you the B cells, what it does, and the T cells and what they do. And this is just kind of like your cliff notes once you understand, or I guess you would call them Sparks notes now, once you understand what's going on. And with that, we are done with cell-mediated immunity, as well as its role with antibody-mediated immunity. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I know immunity is a little complicated, especially the first time. So if you have any questions, go watch the crash course videos, because he also does a great job.